So we have an interesting selection here of people from the comms business and people in what are at best adjacent fields. And so let's just quickly go around the panel. You can spend a second or two introducing yourselves, and then we can talk about what are the kind of technologies that communications people are using right now that should be exciting and in a lot of ways worrying us. And let's start at the far end there.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Nika Logan, Dr. Nika Logan. I am Associate Professor of Public Relations at Virginia Tech University. My research and teaching areas are public relations, corporate social responsibility, race, diversity, and AI. And I publish in those areas and love teaching them, and happy to be here with you all today.
That is a weird cross-section of specialities, but go ahead.
I try to be weird.
I'm Aaron Quitkin. I'm a founder and CEO of Profit and part of the Stagwell Marketing Cloud. The Aaron that you saw or heard this morning was from the metaverse, got confused, went on a very long run, and came late to the session that started too early. So that was different Aaron. And my background is in corporate reputation management, I guess for the last 3 years since I built this product called Profit. MarTech as well, but I'm an agency guy. I've been doing this for 30 years. Started a company called KWC Global, of which I'm still chair of. I have a great podcast too you should listen to called Brand on Purpose. That's like for an ESG type panel another day, but happy to be here.
Great. I'm Dan Weber. I'm the president of Edelman's DC office, right down the street. I've been with Edelman for almost 2 decades and specialize and focus my work on reputation management, crisis management. I teach at Georgetown, and for about 10 or 15 years, I spent a lot of time focused on digital. I'm very interested in this topic and this conversation because a lot of what we were working with, the nerdy tools, and not just for us and for our clients, but also helping our clients understand and think through the ramifications of how those tools are applied.
And doesn't Edelman have like 300 people dedicated to this?
We have a few.
Right.
We have a few.
Right.
My name is Greg Kihlstrom. I am the host of the Agile World podcast. I also do consulting. I work with Fortune 500 companies and help them with technology implementation and process and things like that. So this topic very much in my lane here, and I've had the pleasure of having Aaron on my podcast as well. So
Let me start with the two PR people on the panel in the middle there and ask you, what do you think the industry's attitude towards technology is? I always feel like there are these sort of competing tensions in our business between technophobia, this sort of view that the old-fashioned way was the best way to do things, and all of this new stuff is a bit too much, and the desire to force technology on our stakeholders. But what has your experience in the business been? Aaron, you've always, as somebody, I remember when you worked in Middleburg, which was arguably the first big .com agency, when .com was a thing that we said.
Thanks for dating me. Appreciate that.
You've been an early adopter historically, but do you feel the industry as a whole is less willing to embrace technology than you are?
I think it depends on how you define technology. So our industry, I think we're winning when it comes to influencer, creator, VIP, celebrity, all those platforms in the social space. And thank God that we took that before the ad agencies tried to take that from us. So we win there. I think where we're still struggling, but I have hope, is we view technology currently as workflow solutions. It's a winner-take-all mentality. We have these workflow technologies that help us and actually play into our complacency and maybe laziness in the industry, whereas I would like us to move from workflow to more point solutions that help us become more performative. So we're an industry that's based on gut instinct when it comes to pitching and earned media in particular, and we can't move away from earned media. That is why we're being hired. But in an environment where increasingly our relationships with media are becoming disintermediated and more transactional and commoditized, I think we need more data to back up that instinct. And I'd like to see us as an industry move away from how did I do, because all of our clients and brand bosses are trying to measure us and we're trying to prove our value and our worth, and they think they're more interesting than they really are. So it's from how did I do to how do I do better. And there's a lot to learn from other industries and how we can do better and using data to backstop our experience and instinct and replace what's really guessing with knowing. I'm sick of downloading lists of 300 media and the success rate is less than 2%. And the media, and I'm actually one of them in my podcast and in my column for The Drum, not competitive with the Provoke, of course, we get shitty pitches every day. So, how do we improve relationships using technology? Long answer, I know, and you told me not to be elaborative.
No, that's okay. Dan?
I'll take it a different direction. I think there's still very much an art and science world that's fighting against each other. And in DC, there's, everybody knows everybody. You've got incredible experts who can tell you the Rolodex very, very quickly, and that's super important. There's also a vanity play when we're trying to talk to our bosses about what's important. And we have to fight against that, because I think what's important, and you do have to give the hat tip to the vanity, but it may not be what's on their radar. And so we have to obsess about the details. We have to obsess about the data and tracking and following where a story is going to go, and whether the people we really care about are seeing it and how they're consuming it and what they're doing with it. And I think one of our challenges, particularly with some of our newer folks coming into the industry, they don't understand the technology. That's not necessarily being trained. We should be all over these tools in our classrooms. And then when we hire them into agencies or when you hire them into your brands, we don't necessarily have the money, the budget to be able to pay for those tools and that training, and we got to obsess about that.
I think that seems to segue right into your wheelhouse, right? And what are you seeing among students in terms of how excited are they about, AI is the one thing you mentioned in your self-introduction, but about all of these technologies and getting to play with all of these wonderful new tools that, when people like Aaron and I were coming into the business, many years apart, clearly, were not available.
Yes, no, I think these are all great discussions. And in our public relations class, we teach, or curriculum rather, we teach PR writing, we teach campaigns, and we teach all of those standard things. But what we're really noticing is an appetite to learn more about technology, whether that's digital content production or, in my particular research interest case, AI. Students are very curious about how these technologies are used, and it's a great opportunity in the classroom to develop them so they come into your agency, Dan, ready to go. In fact, I've been working on developing courses that focus on DEI, communication, and AI, so that students are equipped with these tools when they graduate. But we're really in the early stages from a curriculum development process, but the conversations are ongoing, and I expect that the graduates of today are going to have a learning curve. I'm sorry, so you're going to have to do a little work there. But I think the ones that are coming along, that are freshmen today in high school and junior high school, they will have a much different public relations technology education that will prepare them for the future very well.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to that? Sorry. This is why I never get invited to panels. Are you defining AI as artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence? Because in my experience, at least in our industry, right now it's augmented. I try not to say artificial until we can build these neural networks. I'm just kind of curious how you're teaching it and talking about it as it relates to the PR industry.
I'm defining it as artificial intelligence based on machine learning, in which machines can learn from the data that was input and then make decisions on their own, of course, with human guidance.
Okay.
Okay, actually, that with human guidance raises a great next question for me. I want to, Greg, give you an opportunity to comment on what you've heard so far and whether that resonates with your experience. And then, since you've raised AI and human guidance, I wanted to ask, because the aspect of this that fascinates me is that it is going to create all kinds of ethical challenges for practitioners, for users, that I suspect those of us who are rushing headlong into this, or those of you who are rushing headlong into this, haven't wrestled with. So which should we be most alarmed by, the machine learning or the human guidance?
Right. Yeah. little bit.
Sorry, that wasn't on the preamble. was it?
We're going to need about 45 minutes for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one way to look at this is, the easy thing that I think that it's talked about a lot is that algorithms are influencing what we see, but I think the other part of it is algorithms are also influencing what we create and what we put out there. And so whether we know it or not, we are creating content to be consumed by Google, which is then going to then, show it to many others. And this is, so in a sense, it's all of it, right? It's, we have to be mindful of, we want our clients or our things to be found, but we also need to understand that the machines are building on what's prior and what's available and what's popular and all of those things, not necessarily what's important, and providing diverse opinions and all of those things. So I think there's danger in all, but there's also opportunity in all.
Okay. I wanted to maybe start by, I know we've drifted over into the AI lane already, and we'll come back to it, I promise. I wanted to talk a little bit about data and the way in which our industry is now able to gather data. All of the wonderful things that we can do in terms of personalization because of data. And then coming back to the ethical dimension of this, whether we have thought through all the implications of gathering that data, and whether we need to, maybe this exists somewhere and I haven't seen it, but for the PR industry specifically, to have some sort of rules-based approach to what we ask people for, how we then use it, what is legitimate and not legitimate. And also to say that in a lot of ways, this is not a new issue, right? And I wrote stories 25 years ago that found, where reporters found it sinister that PR people maintained media lists that sort of said conservative, pro-business, anti-business, deep in the pocket of Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth, as if there was something sinister about us just tracking that. What we can do now is exponentially more scary, it would seem to me. So where are we in terms of balancing our ability, what we can do and what we should do?
You're looking at me, okay.
Sure.
So I'll start. Let me just take a step back for a second. I appreciate, the analogy, looking back 25 years. We can learn a lot from other industries. So book publishers, film studios, they're all running scripts through AI and machine learning to determine future commercial viability. There's no reason why we can't create reporter personas to do that, for ourselves. I think the thing that worries me is when you go onto a platform that tries to do everything for you, and you're actually pitching off of that platform, we're hitting agree to user terms in the same way that we do for Facebook. We're giving up all of that without really thinking about where it's going. And I worry about data leakage, cross-contamination, how they're data mining all of that content. And I get it, these vendors want to do that because they're trying to improve the performance of others on the platform so we can learn, but to what extent? And the problem right now I'm having with this, and the sinister part, is there's no transparency around that. So if you're gonna do that, at least tell me you're gonna do that so I can opt into it, but right now, there's very little disclosure. And the other thing, I think, as someone who has bought a lot of tools, not just recently developed tools, you have to also ask certain questions about information security and penetration testing and how things are, sequestered in the cloud. Because a lot of times we are uploading information that is, material, non-public information, and the same about the newswires do.
Can we just stop for a second, Ed, because I'm guessing that there are people in the audience who know as little about this as I do. Data leakage, cross-contamination, penetration testing. Can we just define what we mean by all of that?
Yeah, I think the industry needs to find a new term than penetration testing for sure.
Yes,
it's a
I think
terrible
that's
term.
probably a good idea.
But basically you hire white hat hackers to basically try to hack and Greg knows about this, I'm sure. to try to hack your platform. It's a fascinating, when we first built Profit, one of the best things we could have done is we got a customer who's a large CPG company who's like, you need to go through our process. And part of that starts with penetration testing, and we need to understand your information security protocols, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, they're never going to get on, and they ended up using our platform, but we learned a lot from that experience. A lot of people don't know that needs to be put into, you know, all those types of fortifications and hardening of your systems. So,
Greg, what are you seeing in terms of how users in our industry and beyond are thinking through these issues, or just diving headlong in without thinking much about them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot of external regulations that are being put in place because there's not a lot of self-regulation, I think. You know, and I always, for better or worse, I always think self-regulation is a good starting point, but when industries aren't either choosing not to or really don't understand, then, you know, it's kind of the job of other regulations to step in. But yeah, there's a lot of, in industries that are less, I work a lot in the marketing world as well, which in some ways has been dealing with these things for a little bit longer, or just more different types of data and things like that. And so they may be a little bit ahead in some ways, but they're also need to be regulated. I mean, there's, you know, that's why Google is being sued by the EU and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So I think the first step is just to try to understand, to Aaron, to your point, the transparency of the systems. Not only is it good to understand why things are being shown to you and why things are being collected, but it's kind of lazy not to. You know, you're kind of taking a lot of things for granted, that the things that are being shown to you are being shown to you for the right reasons, or they're the only things or the best things available. And so I think it's just part of, like, another thing you said, augmented intelligence. Like, I think that's something really to wrap your heads around, is machines are there to help us, not to replace thought and to replace conscience and to replace ethics. They're there to really help us do our jobs better. And when we start replacing some of those other areas with machines, then I think we're just going to run into trouble. At the worst, it's going to be lazy, or it's going to be non-complete.
I should ask all of you, have you been surprised at how sanguine most consumers seem to be about just signing away their data to anybody who asks for it? And I remember a session that I was at Cannes. It must have been 4 years ago, because there were at least a couple of down years in between, where the discussion was taking place about whether opt-in rather than opt-out was the best way for companies to do this. And we all at the panel sort of agreed, yes, that's what we should be doing, but I haven't seen a huge transformation in the way companies ask me for my information. Has that surprised you, that people are so willing to just give it all up?
I don't know if people are so much willing to give it all up as much as they may feel that you don't have a choice if you want access to the information, the product or service.
It's like the Apple end user agreement. Mm-hmm. You've got to sign it, right, at the end of the day.
And who's going to read all that, right?
Yeah.
And there are reasons why those things are designed that way. But I want to just piggyback off of what Aaron and Greg were saying, to say transparency is huge, but to the degree possible, we also need to have participation. To your point, more of that, the ability to opt in and selectively on certain things. I'm glad to see that we're seeing that now. That's something that students have recognized and appreciate. So transparency, I think, is important. Participation in how our data is used, but then also accountability when things go wrong. So as PR professionals and educators, I think we're in a very strong position to help lead our organizations to take meaningful steps in these directions, so we're not having these same conversations like 10 years from now.
If I could add a few other thoughts on this, as I think it's really, what you said is really smart. The value of the experience, for it to be seamless. I think the previous panel talking about augmented reality, and I mean, everything is, you have to connect into everything. And so you are signing these legal documents, which I don't understand. But I think this is where our job really steps in, is to explain terms and conditions. in a way that what makes sense, and we can tell stories around those, and we can talk about impact. And I think there's a value there because it's all about trust. And I think the Edelman guy talking about trust, it really is though, the exchange of trust. I'm putting my data in your hands because I trust you. And year over year, you perform okay. But what happens when the machine makes the bad decision? What happens when the leakage occurs, as you said, or a threat actor breaks in? That's when we now have to explain, and we're on the back foot, and no one trusts you in that regard.
Right.
And so we have to get ahead of that. And I think we need to be thinking about it across every single company. As a university, the amount of information, as PR firms or agencies, the amount of information we have to be talking about more than just the terms and conditions. We can't just let the lawyers talk about this, because it has to go all the way up to the CEO to talk about what do they understand about what we're doing and what our consumers are doing. What does it mean when you're going through an experience with me as a company or providing a service? So this is a really important piece, and I think that question is the one I get hung up on. When the machine makes the wrong decision, are we ready to communicate about what that means or doesn't mean?
I don't think machines you're right, because I think if a machine makes a decision, that's horrific. Machine just needs to give us optionality. And I think part of trust is an alignment of interest. And I think we all want to be more performative. It is frightening to me, just like going back to earned media, what a low success rate we all have. Like, we just accept failure, basically. And in a very, right? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. So I just...
PR is the baseball of communications.
I say that all the time, and maybe it's because
Really?
I'm quoting you. I have no idea. But yeah, you're right. You're
No, I
absolutely
just
right.
thought of it.
Okay. But I think that the areas that are really ripe, I mean, like Frank was trying to be, or not be a vessel of hope. I'm going to be the vessel of hope just for a second. I think generative content, and by that I mean, people have said to me, okay, so I get it. I upload a pitch, and it's not getting the success that I want it to get based on how I'm testing it. But I'm like, well, your pitch is really shitty, that's why. And I don't quite say it like that. So whatever you put in, if it's bad, you're gonna get bad outcomes. Technology's not gonna help you. But there are technologies out there. Jasper just raised a shit ton of money. Sorry, I'm gonna just curse on this panel because no one's cursed enough. And they're valued at more than $1 billion. They're creating blog content. They're getting you 80% of the way there. In the human world, we say to our staff, get me 80% of the way there, and I'm gonna edit the rest and make it better. I think that generative AI can do that. I think we should be able to say to Alexa, hey, I have a story idea. Can you check this for me? I think voice skills play into this. I think that we talked about misinformation and disinformation and comparative analysis. I think that the landscape for adopting technology, both at the university level and then at the commercial level, is tremendous. And that's why I've given up and/or pivoted in my 30-year career on the agency side to move into this. And maybe I'm the fool for that. I have no idea. But it's incredibly exciting.
So I want to look at AI again. Come back, circle around, whatever. So I don't know. Does anybody in this room, or has anybody in this room watched a sitcom called American Auto? Nobody, right?
Wow.
I'm the only person who watches this show. I recommend it to you all because the main protagonist is a public relations person working for an automobile company. And there's a wonderful first episode.
You probably went to Ozfest too, didn't you?
No.
Same.
There's a wonderful first episode where they have been using AI to develop their first self-driving car. And they're about to take it for a test drive with journalists. And they get in, and the car starts rolling down the street, and a guy walks out in front of it, and it just plows through the guy. Why does it plow through the guy? Because the guy is black, and the AI has been taught that the people it should watch out for in the road are white. Now, I'm obviously that's hyperbole in a way. But it's not a million miles away from what's happened in the real world with, for example, crash test dummies that are all designed to be the size of and bulk of and height of men. And so, seatbelts and airbags do a great job of...
Or in healthcare, everything's designed for men.
Of protecting, fat old white dudes like me, and a pretty shitty job of protecting diminutive women. There's a garbage in, garbage out element, is what I'm saying in an incredibly lengthy and weird way. How do we guard against that? How do we make sure that we are developing AIs that don't have all the flaws that we have as human beings? What do you see happening there, Nika?
Well, I think the first and most important thing that we have now that, say, we didn't have 50 years ago is the awareness of the fact that data is not at all neutral and objective, right? The technologies that run off of AI and that are powered by algorithms that receive their food, so to speak, is from data. Sometimes, often, data is collected in ways that are not equitable. Sometimes data is encoded with biases, and then the machines that learn from that data reproduce those biases, and then those biases become reified in the world. So can we undo all of that? No. But what we can do is recognize that it actually occurs, and then what we can do, and from our perspective as PR people, is we can ask our organizations about the data, right? We can ask, how was this collected? Are there any unanticipated consequences from this algorithm or from the way this technology operates? And when we identify it, we can fix it. We can conduct, AI audits. I understand there's security reasons around that, and people don't necessarily want to share everything about their algorithms with outside parties, but what can be done from the inside? So my perspective is that public relations, in my belief, often functions as the conscience of the organization. So we can take our awareness of how technologies, AI, reproduce these inequitable things that none of us want to see. We can take that knowledge and then look retroactively at the data and the programs that we're currently using, identify those problems, address them and fix them. But more importantly, those of us that work in organizations that collect big data and have the ability to generate AI can take a proactive stance and try to do so equitably from the beginning.
I agree. I've never quite liked the conscience of the corporation language, but I understand the point. And
Sorry.
I think the point is valid. But more to the point, I think there has to be somebody in the room,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Who is saying to the engineers and the data people and the finance people and the operations people, hey, think about the ethical implications of this. Think about what this means for our consumers. But I also feel like we're just piling more and more responsibility on public relations people. I mean, just at this conference, right? As a PR person, you're responsible for mental health. You're responsible for, media equity. We've been going through all these things.
We are important people.
We are.
Fucking, it's a hose pipe of stuff that we have to think about. And are we ready to do this job?
No. And I think, look, AI and other things like
Okay.
this are an extension of our culture. So as an organization, if our culture is not evolving, so when we're writing those algorithms, if it's written by a bunch of men, it's going to reflect those men's experience.
Correct.
And we need to change that. That needs to be infused from the leadership. And PR's job is to help to reflect that.
Right.
To have a credit card that's not giving people credit because they're women, or a program that's not allowing people to apply for a job, they don't get through their filter because they're women. That's really tough.
Okay, sorry, we have like a minute and a half left, and I noticed that we said we were going to talk about deep fakes, and we haven't said a word about deep fakes. So, deep fakes, obviously they're here, right? It's not like something that we should be worried about popping up 5 years from now. Deep fakes are pretty real right now. What do we need to do to police that, to be ready to respond to that, to respond credibly to that? Because, lots of people, the whole thing in the past has been who you're going to believe, me or your lying eyes. Well, now your eyes really are lying, right? What you saw is actually not real. How do we deal with that?
And now we're getting, those of you following the Bruce Willis
In a
thing.
minute, by the way.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, like Bruce Willis has now licensed his likeness, so, to be a deep fake, like an intentional deep fake. And so, we're crossing now a whole new weird realm of, yes, there's the unintentional and the nefarious deep fakes, and now all of a sudden there are the intentional and not nefarious deep fakes. I don't have a great answer to how to solve that. But I think there definitely needs, every company needs a response, or everyone needs to be able to have a response at hand.
Two quick things. I don't know if this is actually Greg. He might be a deep fake. Two things though. You got to obsess about listening because you need to know everything that people are saying about you. And then the other side of it is you have to be putting out content that you are, and there's a lot of tricks to making sure that that content is totally branded to you, that you can check when it is a deep fake. But if you're not filling that zone, then others are going to fill that vacuum up.
And can I add one last thing? Sorry. Prioritize your tech stacks, because there are technologies that can help you parse those things. And and I say this as president of PRSA New York currently, and I know PR Council is here, and ECO. These organizations need to pay attention to technology, and we need to start self-governing. Not quite like the White House did with their AI principles, but I'd like to see more from our own industry groups.
Sorry, we didn't even get into the White House AI principles.
Yeah, that's okay.
And their implications. Nika, do you want a last word?
Last word I'd say on the deep fakes is that from an educational perspective, it's just another opportunity for us to provide practical and useful education to the students of today and tomorrow who are going to encounter them more and more.
Great. I feel like we could have spent an hour and still only kept throwing out challenges and questions rather than coming up with definitive answers. But these are all issues, it seems to me, that public relations people need to be thinking through in a way that many of them are not right now. I mean, and I understand that this conference in particular and the demands of your job in particular, there's a lot of stuff that's happening now that you have to deal with. But man, if you're not thinking about this stuff and when it's going to come down the pike and bite you in the ass, that bite is going to be pretty severe. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Great discussion. Thank you.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you for having me. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.